Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So, I know I mentioned in previous videos, especially as of recently, that I was not going to do another OC-Tober video so quickly, but I thought that today's prompt was not going to be similar to the ones that I've done previously because those ones were more focused on like black and white, kind of like similar inking style that I've been doing for the rest of my OC-Tober drawings. But this one, I decided to approach it a little bit differently. So this one, I will also still put up the prompts that I'm following. But day 15 is as non-human, but I thought because the idea that I had was a little bit more on the simple side, I decided to do all of my OCs as Animal Crossing villagers, I guess. So I decided to assign each of my OCs an animal that they would be, as well as their I guess like their personality type. So starting off, I was actually going to only do the three of my OCs. So I was going to start off with Maseki. Then on the left of this one, or not the left, on the right of this one, we have my OC Kaisen. And then below them, we have my OC Selwyn. But because I was having a lot of fun just like playing around with the colors and figuring out what kind of like animals I would assign my OCs, I ended up doing the rest of them. So you'll see Sato, Moriko, Akemi, and Koji on the next canvas because I decided that like a little bit later on. But let's talk about process first because like I mentioned, I did end up going a different route for this entirety of like the illustrations and stuff. And like I mentioned, because they're on the simple side, I decided to do multiple. But I knew that I wanted to do more of like lineless style in a sense. So kind of like the complete opposite of me working on, let's say, inking. I'm doing no line work. So I decided to use the Fugo pencil. And this is like one of my favorite to sketch with whenever I'm working on Clip Studio Paint or if I want to do some just rough sketching. It has like a nice little rough texture around the edges. It's more akin to a pencil like it is in its name. So it's a little bit more gritty. But I found it kind of fun to use if I wanted to do something more like doodle-esque. So I decided to do that for the entirety of the coloring, shading, all of that is just done with the Fugo pencil. One, it kind of keeps things a little bit more simple for myself so I don't have to keep doing like kind of a back and forth between switching between brushes and trying to remember what I used. But then two, I just like the texture of it. It kind of keeps everything a little bit more loose and free for myself so I don't have to commit to having things be super smooth, not like bumpy or like, you know, trying to keep everything clean and pristine. So I kind of just went with this particular style instead. So for color palette, I tried my best to make sure that like the significant color of each of my OCs was still represented, but I was too scared of not making the villager look like my OC. So a lot of them I do give some sort of like hairstyle, and there is like something I kind of forgot that some of these animals have, or I guess like the style of Animal Crossing for clothing is that I guess you either have a shirt that's like a short sleeve, long sleeve, or like tank top-esque, and then you have no pants, but you could have like a long shirt or it's like a skirt, something like adjacent to that. So I kind of forgot about that when I was working on these three. So Maseki's apron technically doesn't make sense as I don't think villagers typically wear something that would expose the legs and only cover like a portion of like their lower half, including their upper half, if that makes sense. I think I would have to do it as more like a longer, oh, akin to a dress, I guess, but it would be like his shirt color, and then part of it would be like the apron portion, which is like the brown. But because I forgot about that, I ended up just making the entirety of Maseki. He is a squirrel. I always imagined him as more of like a cute rodent type, but I didn't think like mouse or hamster fit him, so I feel like a squirrel fits him better. So I ended up going with the kind of like minty chocolate colored squirrel color combination, I guess, for Maseki. And then I gave him his little hairstyle. I also took off his little ahoge on the top of his head because none of the villagers really have anything like added to them above their base model other than like a little bit of a bump for maybe hair volume, or if they're like, I think Audie is the only one that has like her sunglasses, which kind of like sits above her head a little bit more, but I think because she's a special character, that's kind of the reason why. So with Masaki out of the way, I will also add in his piercing a little bit later. I kind of just like forgot about it, but working on our next character. So I think obviously Kaisen is a cat. Now I was debating on whether or not I was gonna make the base color for his skin, I guess in this case, to be either kind of like a dark purpley black, or if I wanted to go on the lighter color scheme and just keep him more monochromatic, because his inner shirt's more of like a burgundy. Or like a dark burgundy, but I ended up making more of like a wine purplish color instead to kind of keep it within like the same color range for the most part. But I think personality wise, I was debating whether or not he would be cranky or smug. He's kind of like in between both, in my opinion, but I don't know how to, like, how would I want to assign them, because none of my characters are like super duper smug in a sense, unless you want to say like maybe Koji breaches into there, or like Kaisen kind of breaches into there. But I kind of needed a cranky character, and I feel like Kaisen is kind of the best pick for that because he's a little bit prickly at times. So maybe he'd fit the best for that personality. So the way how I'm working with kind of like using a lineless style, I ended up moving my sketch to be on the very top of all of my layers and leaving it at a fairly low opacity. And then I take kind of our base color for our character and block out the entire kind of silhouette of the character before I start to work on the details. And then when I feel like the details are kind of like placed where I want them to be, and I'm using like a bunch of layers so that I don't have to like fuss around with accidentally coloring and recoloring over things if I accidentally make something a little bit messy. But then once that's all settled, I will hide my sketch layer, and then we can fix the details a little bit, fix the colors here and there, and then add a bit of a drop shadow. Or not a drop shadow, I'm adding shading. But I'm also using the shading low-key as a bit of an outline around the character so that they don't appear too flat, but I don't want them to appear like too sticker-ish like, if that makes sense. I wasn't following specifically like the Animal Crossing style in terms of like what they look like for like rendering and stuff, because they are like more like 3D models, and they're more, how do I explain this? I feel like the shading and stuff would have required me to do a little bit more rendering, which I was not up to in terms of like working on that for all of my OCs. So I did keep it towards a little bit more of a cell shaded style, but I didn't want to go too overboard. So leaving it more as a monochromatic kind of some kind of grayish color and dropping it into multiply so that I can just shade the character in their entirety all at once. But because Kaisen is finished, let's go ahead and move on to Selwyn. Now, Selwyn for me was one of the hardest to kind of like assign a animal character to. I don't know if it's because I'm biased towards like the little squirrel characters for some of more of like the cutesier, softer type of characters. And Masaki and Selwyn, at least like personality wise, they have a little bit more overlap. Probably because like I've talked about this several times about Selwyn, but if you're unfamiliar, Selwyn's kind of supposed to be the character that's like a conglomeration of all of my favorite aspects of what I like from certain characters visually and like a little bit more like personality wise and all that stuff. So a lot of visual aspects are kind of like stemming from a lot of characters that I enjoy in other media or just like drawing. So like fluffier hair, bigger glasses, chunkier sweaters, kind of like almost preppy-ish clothing, if that makes sense. Darker hair, probably blue, dark eyes-ish kind of realm. I gave him more like sunset eyes. I'll get into that a little bit later, and maybe I'll put like a speed paint at some point, because another reason why I ended up doing this video was because the video that I was planning to record, the recording did not record. So like I have a chunk of a certain part of the beginning of what I wanted to work on, but then the rest did not record while I was trying to finishing up. So that's why I ended up just doing the OC-Tober instead. But before I go too off on a tangent, I ended up keeping Selwyn within a similar range of like a mammalian character. So I ended up making him one of the taller bears because I've also mentioned in the past that Selwyn's not going to be like tiny. He is on like the thinner, scrawnier side, but he's very much like a tall character because I do like that trope of like a softer, taller character. I feel like it's more akin to like characters that are a little bit more cold looking and they're more of like a softie on the inside, but I still wanted Selwyn to be like tall rather than like tiny and short. So I ended up making him the normal bear side instead of like the baby bear. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing for Selwyn. I also kept him as lazy. Like I said, he kind of has a bit of an overlap with Masaki, so they do share the same personality in terms of the personalities in Animal Crossing, since I believe there's only 4 of each per gender, I guess, in this case. So for the male characters, you have lazy, smug, cranky, and jock, which only fits really one of my OCs, but it's not of any of these 3. And then for our girls, we have normal, peppy, I think it's Uchi or sisterly. And I believe the last one is Snooty, which I don't think fits any of my girls, which is only Sato and Moriko. So we'll get onto those in a bit. I'm going to quickly show you guys a quick little time lapse. Since we finished these 3, out of like all the villagers that I ended up drawing for all of my OCs, these ones are my favorite. It's probably also because I spent a little bit more time planning and thinking about like colors, as well as like the pose, the shape, and just like having reference material and all that. So the next 4 are going to be a little bit of a struggle. So I did not plan them, and I kind of did them right after these ones. So I had a good idea of how I wanted to at least approach the drawing, but like design aspect, the color distribution, and like whether or not I wanted to pick like different animals for them were kind of like just picked on the spot. So if they don't really fit, I do apologize, but we're just gonna go and roll with it. Also, I did end up putting in the little earring for Masaki at the very end. I just didn't really show it in the video. So yeah, but let's go ahead and move on to the rest of my OCs. So at the very top, I ended up putting the list just in case I forget any of my OCs. But starting off, we are working on Moriko. So Moriko, I was debating on whether or not she would be also a cat or if she would be something like a wolf. I feel like for her kind of like charisma and her energy, I feel like wolf might fit the best for her demeanor. So ended up going with this. Now, I was kind of scared of drawing the wolf character because of the way their muzzle, I guess, sticks out. I was kind of scared whether or not I could interpret that into the lineless style since I'm not super familiar working with it. But I think she turned out pretty okay. It's not my favorite, but you know, it's okay nonetheless. And then moving on, we have my OC Sato, which I found the bunny character would have fit her the best, I think. For the most part, I was debating whether or not she would be a different like rodent character or if I also wanted her to be something that's like wolf adjacent so that her and Moriko could match. But I feel like a rabbit would fit her and then she would be kind of like the tough type and then Moriko would be more of like the meeker kind of wolf character, and that's their dynamic. And then moving on, just below Sato, we have my OC Akemi. Akemi, I think, was like a no-brainer for me. He was like a bird. I just wanted to give him glasses. I feel like the colors would have fit him well. In terms of like any patterning or like the distribution of colors was a little bit easier for myself to imagine. Now, Koji's was a little bit more difficult. So as you can see, I ended up starting him off as like a little hamster character, but I didn't really like it. I think it's just the way that I drew it. He could definitely be like the hamster type, but I will end up just scrapping this one entirely and switching him to a mouse. Now, I forget the mouse's character from Animal Crossing that I feel like he kind of looks like. It might be, it's not Rodney, but it's like the purpley kind of mouse in Animal Crossing. I might have to look it up a little bit later, but I thought that would fit him a bit better. So Koji is like my youngest of my OCs. He's like a child. He's also very like tiny and cute in my opinion, but he's a little like scrappy-ish. So I thought maybe a mouse would fit a little bit better in terms of like demeanor. But I feel like also the hamster could have worked. I just needed to commit a little bit more properly. It's just, oh, I guess I did end up putting Masaki's earring. Whoops. Oh well. At least I didn't forget. But yes, hamster could have worked, but I feel like, I don't know. There's just something about a mouse that I feel like is a little bit more akin to Koji. And maybe it's that scrappiness, like I mentioned, instead of having a hamster, which I feel like they're a little bit crazy in energy, but maybe a little bit less scrappy in terms of like hunting and foraging, that kind of stuff. So yeah, mouse fits probably Koji better. Also, you can kind of see that the way that I'm approaching these drawings right now, I'm kind of avoiding Moriko's. So I started off with Sato. Hers is not my favorite. I think it's also because I gave her lack of a nose, so she hardly resembles like a rabbit, or at least like properly resembles a rabbit. But after I finished hers, I moved on to Akemi and gave him these colors. Now, I was thinking maybe I was gonna make him more of like actual blue color for his skin tone base, but because his hair is supposed to be that color, and I feel like his hair is very important to his character, having more of like that blunt cut, straight bangs type of look, I ended up making his base more of like the pale yellow and added some white to differentiate, kind of like where his hair and his skin tone would meet. So I wanted to separate that more and just like distribute the white more throughout his entire look because of his shirt. And then, yeah, gave him his glasses. I didn't change his eye color. I kind of like the navy blue look, because otherwise it would have been like a dark yellow and it might have kind of blended in too much into his face, and I kind of like the contrast. So I ended up keeping his eyes to be kind of like that darker blue. And I think for all of these guys, I did try my best to keep to the rules of how they would actually wear the clothing for Animal Crossing villagers. So I tried my best to keep a lot of their clothing stuck to their models and not anything that doesn't either have like just a shirt and a top or whatever. And then as well as like a either long shirt or like a skirt dress type of situation that they could be going on with. And then working on Koji's, I ended up giving him hair as well. There's like, it was harder for me to figure out how to make it look more like Koji without them, and I ended up making his ears also the same color of his hair so that we could bleed it up. And I thought it'd be cute to give him kind of the two-toned ear colors on the inside, kind of giving a little bit more of like that gaming kind of aesthetic as well, just a smidge. But I thought it'd be just a cute touch to distribute more red and blue within his entire look. And then last but not least, the one that I was kind of avoiding, we are working on Moriko. So Moriko, I did change her color distribution so that it resembled her color palette a little bit more. So Moriko, I guess like her skin tone color, I ended up going with the dark green because I did not know where else to put the dark green otherwise, unless I swapped the dark green and the brown, which could have been a choice that I could have done, but it looked too human-ish in my brain, so I thought it'd be more fun to give her a funky color so she could be more of like the evergreen-ish color for her skin tone, have accents of brown, and then we could have our very dark, muted, almost blue, black greenish color for the rest of the accents and her outfit. And this is what I ended up going with. I had to add like the little crease on where the muzzle snout-ish area attaches to the face. Otherwise, she just looked more like a crocodile, which I didn't really want. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing for Moriko. But yes, personality-wise, we have Sato as normal, we have Peppy for Moriko, we have Smug, I guess, for Akemi, and we have Jock for Koji. But I think that's it for the little villager looks for the rest of my OCs. It's kind of throwing me off that I ended up giving Selwyn pants when they're not really the type to wear pants. I mean, like, Animal Crossing villagers tend to not wear any bottoms, I guess, other than like skirt or whatever. So I might change that, but for the most part, I actually really liked how the majority of these guys came out. I think for me, I think the first three are my favorite. I do like how I did Koji's in the end, but for the most part, they all look okay-ish. But I think some of the other ones that I did, I'm just not too fond of, like Sato, Moriko, maybe. Maybe I'll try again another time. This also marks the halfway point of October, so hopefully your monthly challenge or whatever you're working on goes super well, and I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye bye!